Okay, Year 7s and Year 8s, this is the recipe for you if you haven't got any bread flour and you haven't got any yeast at home, and so you're not able to make bread the conventional way. Now before I do sort of talk you through how to make bread with plain flour and mayonnaise, which is a bit of an unusual ingredient but works quite well, I just wanted to show you something that I've been doing because we've not been able to get hold of yeast in the last few weeks very easily in the shops. And I've actually started my own sourdough culture. Now if you have a little look in this container, you'll see lots and lots of bubbles on the top of this. Now all this container has had in it is some flour and some water, and the bubbles are coming from yeast which are found naturally in the air, and they start to enjoy eating the flour, they ferment and they produce bubbles of CO2 which you can see in here as the bubbles have been made. This is called a sourdough starter. With this, I then am turning this into my own loaves at home by adding this to some flour. Now you do need bread flour to be able to do this, but this is a loaf that I've just got here proving, and you can see it's rising really nicely. It went in, it's grown about this much since it's been in there, and this is the yeast from the sourdough starter that is making this bread rise. So if you don't have yeast at home but you've got plenty of flour, making a sourdough starter might take a little bit of time, but it might actually give you some nice bread. We've certainly been enjoying the sourdough bread that it's been making. It does take a very long time. To get your starter ready it takes about a week, and to actually make a loaf of bread takes about 6 hours a day, 6 hours of the day. Anyway, this is how to make your bread from plain flour and mayonnaise. First things first, I've washed my hands, I've put an apron on. If I needed to, I've tied my hair back. And then whatever your parents or carers would like you to do to clean your surfaces, I'd like you to clean your surfaces down so that they are clean before you start. You're then going to need to preheat your oven. I've turned my oven onto 180 degrees. That's for a fan oven. If you've got a non-fan electric oven, it's about 200 degrees. If you've got a gas cooker, it's about gas mark 5. You're going to turn your oven on, and then you're going to get yourself a bun tin. Now this is what you'd make cupcakes in. It's a very shallow tin. And I've put paper cases in 9 or 10 of these 9 or 10 of these tins. You may not need all of these, but it means that I've got them out and I have them ready to use if I need them. You could do these in muffin tins. So if you've got muffin tins, they are very much deeper, and you'd probably need about 6 muffin paper cases in your tin if you were going to use muffin sized. These will take less time to cook. Muffin size will be deeper. They will take probably another 5 minutes to cook. Once you've got that ready, we're then going to weigh ourselves some flour. Remember, to weigh accurately, you put your scales onto the surface that you're going to use. You then put your bowl on top before you press start. That means that the measurements will go to 0 grams. If they're not on 0G, 0 grams, then you need to ask your parent or carer to help you make that happen. And then I'm going to start measuring some flour, or weighing some flour. We need 125 grams of plain flour. Now if you've only got self-raising at home, use self-raising flour, that's absolutely fine. But 125 grams of plain flour. Like we said previously, if you're a few grams out, that's okay. So that's gone to 129 grams. For this recipe, that will be okay. Now to this, I'm going to add a few ingredients. I need to add half a teaspoon of salt. Now I've got measuring spoons here, and this is for half a teaspoon here. Salt will make this will be very salty if you add much more salt than this, so try to make sure you don't measure your salt out over the bowl in case you have an accident and too much comes out. Half a teaspoon of salt goes in. I don't need my scales now, so I'm going to move them out of the way so I don't break them. To that I'm then going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Baking powder is kind of in place of the yeast. The yeast creates bubbles of CO2 as the bread would prove and get warm and take time to allow the yeast to produce CO2. Baking powder, as soon as it gets wet, produces carbon dioxide, so it's going to do a similar function to the yeast. However, too much baking powder can make your dishes taste artificial, so be careful to only use the right amount of those. To that then I'm going to add 2 level tablespoons of mayonnaise. Again, I've got a measuring spoon here which is a tablespoon. Mayonnaise isn't the easiest thing to measure out, particularly in a squeezy bottle, because it comes out quite with a lot of air between it. That's 1. Let's add another tablespoon. So that's 2 tablespoons of mayonnaise. And then we need 125 millilitres of milk. Now I don't want you to add all of the milk in at one time. I'd like you to start by adding about 2/3 of the milk. Now I measured the milk out earlier, and when I was looking at it from standing up, it looked like I had 125 ml. However, when I crouched down, I was only on 100 ml. So please make sure your measuring is accurate. I've measured mine up to 125 ml. I'm going to add about 2/3 of this in with my plain flour, and then I'm going to mix it using a knife that I'd used to butter my bread. So that's about 2/3 of it. I go in with my knife that I'd used to butter my bread, and I stir. And at this stage I'm trying to mix in the mayonnaise, the milk and all of the dry powdery products together. And at this stage it's starting to come together really nicely, but I've still got quite a bit of milk left, so I'm going to add in another couple of tablespoons. But I don't think I'm going to add that last tablespoon because it will be very, very sticky. Now this is not a dough that you can knead, and even with bread dough, when you would knead bread dough, this is not a traditional bread dough, so you will not need this. You cannot knead this, it literally is a liquidy paste. What we are going to do is divide this liquidy paste between our muffin cases. So I'm going to take a spoonful, it's probably about 2 teaspoons of the mixture, and place it into a cupcake case. Now I'm trying to be careful that I don't get this mixture all over the rest of the tin, because when you do your washing up later, you'll have to clean that off your tin and it will be difficult. Now you might wonder why I've put the paper cases quite the way I have and not put any in these 2 in the middle here. There is a reason for this, and it's because when things go into the cooker, they cook from the outside in, and what we want is for these to cook at the same time. So if we've got our bread on the outside edges of the tray, it will cook at roughly the same time. If we put some in the middle, they will take ever so slightly longer to cook, and we want them all to come out at exactly the right time. I managed to get some of that onto the tin, that's not good. There. So that's 7. I think we're going to have enough for about 8 bread rolls. Now if you were making bread traditionally, you would be able to shape your bread rolls in a variety of ways, and if you want to see how you do that, if you watch the end of the other video I've made on bread making the normal way, then you'll be able to see me shape some rolls. But with this, it is too sticky, we could not shape it. So you can see I've managed to make 8 cupcake cases. So these 2 I can keep for another time because they're clean. And at this stage I'm going to put my oven gloves on, and at this stage we're going to get these into the oven. Now you need to ask your parent or carer to help you do that, and you also need to remember our safe way of getting things into the oven. We're going to have our oven gloves on, and whoever is putting things into the oven is going to be holding onto the tray carefully. Then the second person will open up your oven door and hold it open. And while you're waiting to put these into the oven, you need to count 3 so that any hot air from the oven will escape and doesn't burn you as it escapes from the oven. You'll then put these into the oven and close the door. Like I've said, if you ask your parent or carer to do this for you, that would be sensible. So these are going to go safely into the oven. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, in it goes. Now I'm going to put a timer on for these. They need about 20 to 25 minutes. I'm going to show you what they look like when they come out. I know at the moment they don't look like bread rolls, but have faith. We have made these before and they do work. So trust me, if you put all the right ingredients in all the right measurements, this should work. I'll rejoin you when they come out of the oven. Thank you. My veg rolls then have been, or my rolls have been in the oven for 20 minutes. The timer has just gone off. In the time that they were in the oven, I've done all my washing and drying up, made sure it was nice and clean and put it away where possible. And I've also got ready my oven gloves to take these out, and also either a cooling rack or a heat-proof mat to put these rolls on when they come out of the oven. Once you've got yourself ready then, I would suggest you ask your parent or carer to help you take these out of the oven, but if you are doing it with their help, then one person needs to have the oven gloves on, the other person's going to open the oven door and hold it open for them, and then we're going to count to 3 before we get the rolls out of the oven, just so that it allows all of that hot air that's been built up to escape and not burn us in the face. So, I'm going to open the oven door and count 1, 2, 3, and then carefully get these out and put them onto the cooling rack. Try to have your cooling rack or cooling mat as near to the oven as you possibly can, so you're not traipsing across the kitchen with very hot trays. So you can see these have come out. They are a really nice golden colour. They're going to be very, very hot, so don't be tempted to touch them for a while, and the tray will stay hot for a long time, which is why I've got one oven glove with it on my hand and holding the tray down. They've gone well risen. They've also gone golden on top, and if I'm able to take one out, please don't try this. This is just so that you can see what they look like on the inside. They do want to stick a little bit to the wrappers. So this will be a nice little job for you once they're cooled to take them off. And once you get them off, you hopefully will find that they are cooked through the middle there. Sorry, I'm trying to get them to open up for you. They've got some aeration in there, and by the aeration I mean they've got some little bubbles in there of CO2 which has been created by the baking powder. They won't be exactly like bread rolls, but they might just give you a little different insight into how to make bread when you haven't got bread flour, when you haven't got yeast. If you've made these, I hope you've enjoyed making them. Please, as I say, don't try and take them out of the wrappers until they are really cold. You might want to, I didn't add 1 tablespoon of my milk, you could add that final tablespoon. It might make them so they don't stick in the paper cases. That's your choice. But I hope you get on well with this recipe, and let me know how you get on. Thank you.